Maureen, you can take it away.
All right, well, welcome everybody. If you don't know, this is our third of three. So it's our last lunch and learn with these two lovely ladies. We have Donna Miller from C3 Workplace and Karen Yankovich from UpLevel Media. Did I say that right, Karen?
You did. All good.
Okay. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last two, so I'm sure this one is going to be just as entertaining. You girls are actually entertaining along with giving out a lot of knowledge, so thank you very much for that.
No song and dance, though, just saying. The entertainment is coming from our stories.
That's true.
So I would like to start off by thanking our corporate partners. We have Crown Plaza, Eastbrook College, Good Samaritan, Sarah Supermarkets, Conica Minolta, M&T Bank, TD Bank, Sheridan Mahwah, and Valley Health Systems. They really do help the chamber be what the chamber is today. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to you girls, and thank you again, and enjoy having lunch with you for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
so
me too.
Hi, Maureen. We thank you, and we'll do this again at some point. So thank you very much, Maureen. So as Maureen said, I am president and founder of C3 Workplace, where for the last 25 years, we've been helping companies start and grow by providing flexible office space, virtual assistance, so you can focus on driving your business forward, bookkeeping, because we firmly believe that financial literacy is a business superpower. And having been at this for a couple of decades, the place where I spend most of my time these days is in business growth advisory services, one-to-one consulting, group coaching, and I have some programs that I offer to help you focus on the things that will help you to earn more. That's a little bit about me. Karen, tell them about your fabulous self.
So we stay really tightly focused on LinkedIn marketing. Our market is mostly entrepreneurs and small business owners. We definitely help some bigger corporations. We come in and do that kind of work too, but we really focus on how to use, and LinkedIn, by the way, is the tool, right? It's not really about LinkedIn. It's about relationships, which is why I love today's topic. It's really the tool that we all have, that we're so also lucky to have access to at no cost, that allows us to facilitate networking and building relationships and growing our business. And over the years, I found that is really where it keeps boiling down to with my business, with my clients. So we just stick there now. And I have a digital program. We do some one-on-one work. We write LinkedIn profiles, but we're pretty tight to that. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. This has been a lot of fun to do, and looking forward to seeing what shakes out today.
Absolutely. So just a tiny bit of housekeeping before we get into our conversation. We are recording this webinar. Please feel free to use the chat window or the Q&A. We will make this as interactive as you would like it to be. And Karen and I are going to chat for about a half hour and wrap it up. So with that, so far in the first 2 episodes, we'll call them, we talked about pivoting. We've all been talking about pivoting during the last session. And Karen and I shared a little bit about what it's been like to lead a team through this current COVID environment, and working at home, and some of the things that have worked for us. And we've also talked about prospecting, which of course, that's really what this series is about, is, growing and staying connected while we're quote unquote disconnected. Today, what I think we both want to finish with, because I found it to be the common thread between how Karen and I believe you build a business, and that's with relationships.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that I believe, and we've talked about this before, but I believe that one thing that, that's one of the things that I think we're all seeing, is that it's the relationships that we have that are taking us through this change and shift in our businesses, whatever that looks like for you. The relationships are really the key to making it successful.
Absolutely. So let's kind of get back to basics and just kind of start. Karen, what is your philosophy, process, approach, and whether it's LinkedIn or offline, what's the approach to relationship building? What's the cornerstone?
Yeah. So when it comes to my business, and of course that's what we're talking about here, I really like to leverage both. I really do like in person, but I leverage it with LinkedIn. So by creating a LinkedIn profile, which by the way is never done, just so you guys know, I spoke to my team today and going, when are we getting to my profile? Because I'm talking to all these people going, and soon my profile is going to be updated where I'm telling you to update it because LinkedIn's made a few changes and we just haven't gotten to my profile. So it's never done, but once you've gotten it where you want it to be, there's just some tweaking that you could do to keep it where you want it to be, right? But because that does some of the heavy lifting for you. So when you go to a networking meeting at the Mahwah Chamber, first of all, hopefully you've already done some micro targeting already, going to that meeting saying, there's 10 people that belong to this chamber that I really want to meet, right? Because you've looked at the directory, you've done some homework, you've kind of shown up with an intention, and then you just kind of look and maybe even ask Maureen or, and see and say, or whoever happens to be there and say, any of these people here today or registered for this, right? Because they want to facilitate this, right? So if you have connected with them already, even if you've never met them, if you've connected with them on LinkedIn already and said, hey, we're both members of the Mahwah Chamber, I'd love to get to know more about you because it looks like you're doing some cool things. Then when you meet people in these networking meetings, they're saying, you know what, I know you were already connected on LinkedIn, right? So you've already taken the know, like, and trust in the relationship building a step further before you even meet them in person. But don't overlook the importance of the in-person meeting because that's where you solidify things. So whether you've connected with them before or you connect with them on LinkedIn after the meeting, remember that your profile is doing that heavy lifting saying, wow, she looks like she knows her stuff. I really want to get to know her better. And that comes from you. Nobody can do that but you on your profile. So leveraging them together, I think is really valuable, but taking it beyond, taking it just beyond the networking, like thinking about events that the chamber does, like the social media event that was, I'm not really sure what we call it, but the business conference that was held a couple months ago. Looking at the speakers that are going to be there. Like, I don't know if you guys, but I was really impressed with the speakers. Monica Kang and I are buddies now.
Yeah.
She's been on my podcast. I've been on her YouTube channel. She came on my LinkedIn Live recently, but it came from me connecting with her ahead of time because I saw she was going to be a speaker there, and saying, hey, looking forward to seeing you there, making sure I sought her out at that event, and then following up with her after the event. That is much more valuable to me in my business, building relationships on that micro-targeted way, but leveraging the in-person and online. So that's a long-winded answer, but again, I don't know about you guys, but I love that I've made new friends at the chamber, but that's not why I joined the chamber, right? I joined the chamber to grow my business. And so by doing that really intentionally, that's my number one focus for relationship building is where are they going to be physically and how can I meet them in person? And then leverage LinkedIn on the backside of that. So what about you, Donna? What is your favorite way to just build relationships?
Well, I think, I agree with everything you said. And I always believe that, the time that you spend at a networking event, whether it's in person or virtual, is the smallest amount of time that is actually allocated to that endeavor because, like you said, there should be prep work and there should be follow-up. And if you're not going to do the prep work and the follow-up, then honestly, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend.
Then you're there to socially network. Then you're really not there, right?
Right. If you want to socialize, socialize. And I also love what we've talked about on every session, which is micro targeting. And I agree with what you talked about. So for me, my process for building relationships is first of all, knowing who I am. And for me, that is making sure that I am clear on my values, that I have a clear vision for my company, my mission, values, vision. You could see in the corner of my whiteboard there, those are my 3 top values and they lead everything I do. They happen to be faith, impact, and community. So for me, relationships start with like-valued and like-minded people. And what I have found, and I actually rebranded my company on that concept, because after being in business for about 10 years, I started to understand the why of what I was doing was very powerful. And so my brand wasn't aligned with my why, so I rebranded. And as I have gotten clearer on who I am, who I stand for, and how that translates into how I run my company, what amazes me is that's exactly what walks into my life, because
Yes.
There is that law of attraction. I know it's kind of
It is.
woo-woo,
I know.
but
You
it's
guys, I
true,
agree. I
right?
completely and utterly agree. If you're not clear on who it is you want to bring into your business and your life, then it doesn't, but, and it's, I mean, it is crazy when it does happen
Right,
sometimes,
right.
you know,
It's fabulous.
crazy.
You,
It
you just
is.
great answers. So I make sure I'm clear on who I am and what I stand for, and kind of to the point of what you were saying about when you went to the Mahwah Chamber's Business Growth Expo. I think it was in January or February, I forget which. You looked up the speakers. Well, I think that's a great little inside secret for all of you. Every time you're going to an event, who are the speakers? Who are the organizers? If it's an in-person event, I always show up early because
Yes.
those are the movers and the shakers.
Yep.
And if you show up early and you say, hey, do you need help with anything?
Yeah.
You're ingratiating yourself to the people who are organizing that event, because what I'm always trying to do, and I talked about this during our last episode, is I try and spend my time not only on a micro target, and for me, that's business owners of professional and creative service firms, but I want to build centers of influence, people who are in front of groups of business owners of professional and creative service firms. So for me, that's about the research, knowing who I am, building those centers of influence. And another great way, in my opinion, to build relationships is to volunteer for the organizations.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right?
Yes,
Participate
yes,
with.
yes. Yep. And you know what? When I first joined the Mahwah Chamber, I was a member for like a year and I barely went to a meeting. And then I was like, you got to volunteer or you're never going to meet these people. And
Right.
that's when I called up and I'm like, put me on a committee, you know, because I knew that that was the only way that I was going to. And I don't know, Maureen might be thinking like that, you know, I don't know if she's thinking that was a good or bad thing in hindsight, because I'm like, we need to do an event and we should do this and we should do that and we need to do better on social media. But honestly, it made a difference. That's how I got to meet the people in the chamber that I wanted to meet. And that's, you know, and that's important. That's important. And, you know, there's other conferences we go to, right? Like when you go to a conference, you're spending a day, 3 days, a week there. You're there to meet, like, do the work ahead of time, right? Figure out who you want to meet with, connect with them ahead of time. So when you get there, whether it's the speakers or the attendees or the organizers, they already know who you are. And you can apply that strategy across your business. If it's worth your time to invest in going there, then it's absolutely worth a couple hours of time before you go to think about who are the most important people for you to meet there, so that you in fact do meet them there. I've had people that I have a client that went to a conference in India, didn't know a single person that was going to be there, was flying halfway across the world. And by the time she got there, she had lunches and coffee dates and everything else scheduled before she even got there, because she used LinkedIn to build relationships ahead of time.
Right. And the other thing I love to do at in-person networking events is, you know, I like to arrive early, kind of get a sense of who the organizers are, maybe who the leaders of the organization itself is. And I see Maureen typed into the chat that she loves volunteers. We know you love volunteers. We love you too.
By the way, speaking of the chat, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, Donna. Those of you that are typing in the chat, make sure you did change it to attendees. Okay. Because I saw that there was a couple messages in here that just went to the panelists. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
So yeah,
make sure you're typing it to panelists and attendees.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed. But the other thing is that if networking is about making new connections, and if growing your business is about accelerating the know, like, trust, try process, right? Mm-hmm. Volunteering is your way to showcase your talents. It is your way to accelerate the know, like, trust process. So it's your integrity. You get to put your integrity and your abilities out there for display. And I think it goes along with the concept, you know, Karen, that you and I have spoken about as well, about the concept of being a go-giver. Show up to give. Yeah. You know, show up to create solutions. Sorry, let me shut my phone off. It's going crazy. Show up to give solutions. So, but the truth is, and Karen, and let me ask you this, I think that these virtual events are here to stay. I think we're going to see more and more of them. I think there'll be panel discussions, there'll be summits. How are we applying everything we just said to these virtual groups, and what makes a good virtual meeting?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that what we have to really understand is now that we're all getting a little bit more comfortable with Zoom, that it is not all that different than meeting in person. It's if there's a room full of people, a Zoom room full of people, if there's 50 people on here, then it is the same. It's like walking into a room full of 50 people. But if it's 2 or 3 people, it's not any different than meeting 2 or 3 people at a coffee shop. It's not that different anyway. And I don't remember if I've had so much of this going on in the last couple of weeks. So I hope I didn't say this before, but I remember going to one of the first conferences that I ever went to after like Periscope and all that came out. And I walked into that conference and I was a speaker at the conference. I think there was 2 people out of the 500 people there that I had ever actually met in person before, but I felt like I knew everyone.
Wow.
Because I saw them. It was the most bizarre thing, Donna, because it was Periscopers, right? So they were talking to you, we're having conversations. Blab was a thing then. So we were having these kind of conversations like this. It was the most striking thing to walk into a room full of people that I had never been in a room with before and feel like I knew them. And I want you to all think about that same thing when you're thinking about this. When you're talking to people, so if there's a room full of 50 people, same concept. Who are the few people that were in that room, that Zoom room, whatever it is that you think you want to get to know better? Schedule a virtual coffee date and get to know them like this. I've worked with people. I have people that I've worked with that I have never met in person.
Yeah.
Like literally, I had an assistant that lived in Canada that she worked with me for like 3.5 years. I never met her in person. I think if I did, other than the fact that we could hug, nothing else would be different because I knew her so well. Right. But so I think what's changed now is that everybody's starting to see that. So if you apply that same thing to this, and just because we're just doing this, it is a little sad that we can't, hug or have coffee or, buy each other. You still can buy each other. You can send them a little Venmo for a cup of coffee, right? You can still do that if you want, right? There's still little creative ways that you can do it, but be creative with these things. And maybe now it's also the time to go back to the days of, I have a whole pile here of like note cards that I'm kind of lax in sending out. Maybe it's time to follow it up with a note card, right? So don't treat this any differently than you would treat a coffee date. And that's the people that are going to do this successfully.
I think that's really good advice. I think that, we've got some of our participants here introducing themselves in the chat window. I think that is one of the ways that you network when we're on these calls. And I do have to say that I think that the note cards are great, and I use them often. And I always say to people, even before COVID, how many handwritten note cards did you get this week? It's a total standout.
Right. And now we love getting them because we're like going to the mailbox is the event of our day now, right? Like we left the house, so.
Oh my gosh, that's pathetic and kind of true. So for me, and I asked you this, and so I'll chime in, and I'm going to ask all of you who are watching. I'd love to hear from you in the chat window. What do you feel makes a good virtual meeting? The truth is, we're all kind of inventing this as we go. I think that's probably the definition of pivoting, is you invent it as you go. And so I think using the chat window, doing the follow-up, I think those things are really important. And let's just, I want to finish up. This time goes so quick.
I know.
Let's talk about, to me, and I mentioned this before, I mentioned centers of influence. I very much believe in the power of strategic partners. I believe in the 80-20 principle. 20% of what you do brings 80% of your results. And I believe that strategic
100%
are in everybody's 20%. So Karen, do you have a process? What's that like for you?
You know what? That process truly is baked into everything I do, because when I teach LinkedIn marketing, you all have gotten those messages from people that say, hey, buy my insurance policy, 401k, watch my webinar, whatever. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that. But if you take that up a level, not a notch, a level, and you look to connect with strategic partners, and then those conversations are not around buy my stuff, but who do you know? This is what I offer. Who do you know? And then they're saying the same thing. And if you're doing this strategically, like Donna, I don't think you and I have ever had this conversation, but we certainly need to, right? Like I'm sure that there's people Donna can send my way, and I'm sure there's people I can send Donna's way, right? So building that relationship is a who do you know level, and then those customers fall out of that. So because I teach LinkedIn, I tend to operate on strategic partner level as the baseline level. And it doesn't mean I don't sometimes look for customers there, like I do. But the baseline, I think, works really better when we are on LinkedIn, when you're operating that upper level. And that is looking for people that have audiences similar to your audiences, or do the kinds of things that you do. But here's the thing, Donna, like I know for you, you're a process person. So do you incorporate processes with the strategic partner stuff? I'm blending your questions here.
I'm a total process person. I have like everything in the world documented because that's how I am. And that comes from reading the E-Myth. And if you haven't read the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, I highly recommend it. And the reason I'm process driven is because processes are repeatable and I can delegate a lot easier if I have a process. So my process for building strategic partnerships, whether it's written or not, is who do I need that strategic partner to be? What are the characteristics of that strategic partner? You know, you talked about people who have an audience. I like to get specific. I mean, I might want to, I have a list, we talked about Sales Navigator last time, but I have a list of my connections that have over 10,000 connections because they're the people I really want to be watching, right? So, you know, what are the criteria? What do I want that strategic partner to be? What do I want that strategic partner to do? That's the first section. The second section is who am I and what am I bringing to the table, right? Who are they? What are they bringing to the table? Who am I? What am I bringing to the table? And then the third area, which is most important, is if we work together, how does 1 + 1 = 5? How are we going to deliver crazy value?
That is such a great question.
Not to us, because we, you know, the obvious advantage of strategic partners is expanded reach. That's great.
Yep.
But even with expanded reach, how does Karen and Donna as a team provide more value to this audience? You know, in this case is where we're giving different perspectives of the same conversation. So I would not be able to provide the breadth and depth of content that we can do together on my own. And then really the other piece has to be, what does success look like? What does success look like for you? What does success look like for me? And again, most important, what does success look like for our shared target market? So, you know, the C3 stands for Connect, Collaborate, Community. Believe me, I am telling you what I do, not what I think you should do. And it's how I've built the C3 Workplace brand. It's how, you know, when you see people and they say, oh my God, you're everywhere. Well, I'm not really everywhere. I have great partners and they're talking me up. And yeah, I look like I'm over here and I look like I'm over there. And so the next phase of that, and this is what I'm going to throw to you, Karen, is if we all know that we have to micro-target, love that. We have to get clear on who we are so we know who we want to connect with. And if we take that up a level to strategic partners, and if we're playing at that level, how do we become influencers? Because to me, influence is the currency of your brand awareness. Influence is what you ultimately take to the bank. Influence converts. So how do we become influencers, whether that's in our communities, on LinkedIn? Talk to me a little bit about influencers, because, you know, there's tons on LinkedIn.
I'm a little worried that you're all going to hate this answer, just to be clear. Content, consistent content, a weekly blog, a weekly podcast. You cannot be an influencer if you don't have anything to point to that shows what your point of view is. So you need to be consistent. I made a commitment to a weekly blog 8, 9 years ago, maybe. It changed everything in my business, because here's what happens now. Like now, and I've said this over the past few episodes, I'm like, you know what? I did a 2-part series on Sales Navigator. Go to that. That helps me be an influencer because I can send you to content that I did 6 months ago, right? You need consistent content. You need, I kind of got to the point where I was like, I cannot write one more blog post. So I decided to move to a podcast. And now I podcast every single week, no matter what. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of inside secret to this. Donna, hold your ears because you're going to hate this. My systems around this need help. My podcast that's coming out on Monday is not recorded yet. Okay. So, but I know, right? But I am, this is very unusual. It's been a really busy couple weeks. And we've shifted things a little bit just with all the messaging and the things that are happening in the world. But it will come out on Monday, come hell or high water, because I'm committed to that. And maybe it'll come out Tuesday if it really has to, because I have my team that has to, when I fall behind like this, puts them behind a little bit, and I don't want to put them on the hot seat. So I'm okay if I push it to Tuesday, but we are not going to skip a week. Now, that doesn't mean I've never skipped a week, because I absolutely have, and I'm sure I will again. But my commitment is to weekly content no matter what. And that is what makes you an influencer. Not because I am any better at this than anybody else, but I have created influence for myself by creating regular content, by telling you on LinkedIn what I do better than everyone else, and by reaching out and consistently building my network full of other influencers. So I don't know, what do you think about that, Donna? Other than you now have to go have some coffee that I've told you that I've got, 12 hours.
First of all, I hope no one who's listening to this is surprised to hear content drives influence. And I agree. And I love what you said. You have to focus on what I do better than others. You are all exceptionally good at what you do. And you have to tell the world that you're exceptionally good at what you do by demonstrating that. So, to me, what you're saying is just completely in line with everything else we've said, which is it's consistency. You have to show up. I don't think there's any real rocket science to all of this. I think it's way more about consistency, and it's way more about getting it out than saying it perfectly.
Absolutely.
I think that's where people get hung up.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. So we also, I think how I've become an influencer is through a combination of everything I just said. Content, I volunteer at organizations, I volunteer to speak, which led to paid speaking gigs. I don't know that anybody has a path to paid speaking gigs other than doing it for free to start.
Donna, hallelujah to that. I completely agree with you. Every single paid speaking gig I ever got was from somebody that saw me speak free somewhere. And then says, what did they pay you to do this? And I go, $5,000. Right? Like,
I don't suppose you have a budget for your speaker.
Oh, that's the first, but no, Donna, I would take that a little bit. My question is always, what's your budget? What's your budget? We'll work with that, because what's your budget immediately tells them that, and if they say no, there's other ways to get paid. There's other ways to get paid than cash. So I think we have, that's series number 2, I think.
That's totally true. That's totally true. But in becoming an influencer, I think that it is about consistency. And I agree with you. I blog at least once a month, but we send something out weekly. So it could be someone else blogging, but I find video to be way easier than writing. I can turn on the camera and I can do a one-take blog in no time. And we found a service, I want to say it's rev.com, where they transcribe them.
Yep.
So
$1.25 a minute.
And they do a great job.
They do.
So now somebody edits that, and I've got a written blog and I've got a video blog. So that's one of our kind of secrets. But the other thing is, sometimes, because we have had some moments of sincere crazy lately, we repurpose some of our evergreen content. We take something that was really well received 2 years ago, and we just use it again and make it today. So
absolutely. We should be doing that. I mean, there's no need to recreate the wheel. And sometimes I remember not that long ago, I don't know what the heck I'm doing with SEO, and I'm getting better at it, and I've got somebody helping me now. But I remember somebody pointed me to the #1 blog that was hit on my website. And it was something I did like 4 years ago. And it was, how do you put symbols in your LinkedIn profile? I'm like, really? Right. So I need to refresh that content, because clearly that's something that, and I was sending people in there to somebody I didn't know at the time, who happens to today be one of my biggest competitors. I was like, here's a great resource for that. And I was like, oh my gosh, my #1 blog on my website, I'm driving people to my competitor, right? But this is, you can't worry about that stuff. You just update it, and you fix it, right? But that's why you don't have to recreate it. But you don't know that stuff till you start doing it. And
Absolutely.
you got to start
Absolutely.
doing it and not be perfect. Somebody recently said something to me like, perfection leads to perfectionists are poor, or perfection leads to poverty, or something like that. And I agree with that. If you're waiting for things to be perfect, you're just never going to get it off the ground, and you're never
Yeah.
going to get your business off the ground, because it's
Completely
going to
overrated.
change the minute you figure it out. It's going to change.
Completely overrated. Okay, so I can't believe time flies. Last question of our 3-part series.
Okay.
Karen, when you look back 2 years from now, what will you be grateful for that COVID-19 made you do? What change happened that you are most grateful for, or thing that happened?
You know what? I mean, I think I probably have a 2-part answer to this. Part one is what it's brought to my business is more focus. It's allowed me to really see what people are looking for from my business, and it's allowed me to see, for what my clients are looking for, and really dial in on that and niche in on that, because it's so easy to have shiny object syndrome and say,
Amen.
wait, this works, let me do this, let me do that. And you go to this event and this happens, you go to this event, that happens, but we're not going to events right now. And I really want to go to events again. But what I now know is that it's the more I focus, the better my business does. And that was proven to me by having having no choice other than focusing. So I think that, and I've known that all along, right? But it's one of those things where you have to see it, and then you're like, wow, this is really the truth. When I get pulled off into shiny object syndromes, it affects my bank account. And then the
Absolutely.
second thing is really about personally. It has really made me, I mean, I do all of this for my family, right? To spend more times with I saw my granddaughters for the first time yesterday since February. Okay.
Oh,
And the reality is, and it was so much fun, but the reality is, if I was out and seeing all these other people, I wouldn't have been able to do that, because I need to make sure that I'm showing up for them healthy, right? Like I don't have any viruses I'm bringing them. Well, that same mindset really should go into beyond just coronavirus and COVID, right? It really should go beyond that and saying, am I showing up for them healthy because I'm not working too hard, and I'm showing up, and I'm going to the gym, or I'm doing whatever I need to do so I can, like yesterday, I took my 2.5, 3-year-old granddaughter to the beach, and she kept wanting, and I didn't, sitting on the sand, and let's go move over here and let's go move over there, and just getting up and down on the sand. I was like, I need a trainer. You know what I mean? But honestly, like that, but that's good to know, right? Because I maybe I need to spend less time focusing on my business and more time, and building that time in for what I'm doing this all for, right? So that's kind of a lesson does that make sense? That's kind of a
that's
lesson
why you're
that
getting clear
sometimes
on your why.
it's so easy for me to get pulled in directions and say, I can't come because I have to do this, and I've got to go here, and I've got to drive here and there. And now I'm like, this is what comes first. Everything I do is about this, so I think that's really meant to, that's really what showed up most for me. How about you?
For me, the blessing that I have found in this current scenario is that I knew I had an amazing team, but my amazing team has stepped up in new ways. And now I've said for quite a few years, I have a company that runs without me on a day-to-day basis. Those of you who follow me, I like to vacation in the middle of the winter and have my feet in the sand. And I always tell you that I have my feet in the sand in the middle of the winter. So I have had a fair amount of work-life balance, or integration, I call it. But my team I now have everyone selling, because everyone should be selling. Everyone on my team who is working on projects has the ability to identify an opportunity. So I now have a company that is well on its way to not only running without me, but growing without me. And that
Awesome.
is effing awesome. There, I said it.
100% is. Oh my
So,
gosh.
and that is because, like you said, on the flip side, I work to live. I have never been the kind of person that needed to make a gazillion dollars, and I never had a desire to work 80 hours a week. I am about finding work-life integration that allows me to spend time with my granddaughter, to go up to my mother-in-law's tomorrow because she's got a tele-doctor appointment, and it's way easier to go do it with her than to try to explain to her how to do it over the phone.
Right. But that's why you created this business and this life, so that you
Absolutely.
can do those things,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And when I realized I had to clear my day yesterday to be able to spend time with my granddaughters, I was like, something's wrong with this.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank the Mahwah Chamber for this opportunity, and all the sponsors who support the Mahwah Chamber that make all of this possible. Karen, it's been really fun.
It has been a lot of fun, Donna, getting to chat with you. And Maureen, thank you so much for this
Yes.
opportunity. And those of you guys that were following the chat, make sure you read Danielle had some good tips for Zoom about your lighting and, you know, remembering to mute and things like that, because those are things that just make a little bit of a difference and raise your professionalism level, right? So definitely, you know, stay in touch with me, stay in touch with Donna. If I can support you, hopefully we're connected on LinkedIn, and you know, we can, I can stay in touch with you that way. We'll see you at a meeting, hopefully at some point soon.
Hey. All right. Well, be well, everyone, and reach out to either one of us. I know I speak for Karen when I say we are go-givers, and we're happy to help however we can. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Mahwah.
Guys.
Thank you, all of you. Have a great day, everyone.